the ocean.
Welcome to episode
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Episode 5, Meet the Ocean.
For people listening at home, can you guys talk about what's a hero?
A hero is someone who saves lives, nurses or doctors or firefighters or police officers. They help the world.
How would you describe an ocean hero?
Ooh! Someone who saves fish.
Welcome to episode 5 of Meet the Ocean. I am your host, Paul North, and I would like to thank the Taylors in Phoenix, Arizona for getting our show started off right. Because our guest on today's episode is, by all accounts, a hero for the ocean. But more specifically, for the men and women who spend time underwater with a tank of compressed air strapped to their back. His name is Dr. Joe Macinnis, and his accomplishments read like a list a child makes when asked what they want to be when they grow up. From diving under the sea ice at the North Pole, to working shoulder to shoulder with some ocean legends as great as Edwin Link, Jacques Cousteau, and James Cameron, Dr. Joe's life reflects his passion to better understand ourselves and our planet. His efforts have directly influenced our knowledge on how humans function underwater, both in body and mind. And more recently, he has studied the blueprints of what it means to be a leader in arenas as diverse as the deep sea, war zones, and even outer space. So it is my pleasure to share with you the character, experience, and humor of Dr. Joe Macinnis.
I'm Dr. Joe Macinnis, and we're aboard the National Geographic Explorer after an extraordinary week and a half in the Southern Ocean and on the continent and ice of Antarctica. So I can't think of a better, more exciting place to talk to you. Coming on board National Geographic Explorer as the Global Perspective speaker is an opportunity not just to come on board the ship and be with an excellent crew, but to be with a group of naturalists and explorers like yourself who are working with the ocean every day. I mean, you're out there, you're diving, you're taking pictures, and then you come back and you tell us what you've seen and you show us what you've seen. So for me, that's extraordinary. I'm here with my daughter, which adds to the delight. But for me, this is a seagoing seminar. This is an opportunity to be with people who are by the sea and for the sea every day. Whether it's penguins or birds or all the creatures that are in and around this ship. And of course, I'm very interested in what you do because it's the world below the surface. For all of us on this ship, you open this universe of creatures, big and small, and that inhabit this extraordinary ocean.
Though this interview took place in the Southern Ocean, I first met Dr. Joe on the opposite side of the planet. We were together aboard the very same vessel, the National Geographic Explorer. We edged along the west coast of Greenland and Baffin Island, and we searched for all the wonders that the Arctic makes available. Now that we had switched polar regions, I had the bright idea to put a microphone on Dr. Joe to let him share his story.
And I've had a fantastic life. I mean, since 1964, which was my first, as a young diving physician, I had an opportunity to work on my first major science and engineering project, supported by National Geographic and the United States Navy, led by Ed Link. 2 guys living in a small station on the edge of the continental shelf, the deepest, longest dive in history at the time. And I was responsible for their health and safety, and that was my start. And then, fast forward almost half a century, I'm working with James Cameron on the Deep Sea Challenge project as his as his expedition physician and expedition journalist, and I have an opportunity not only to work with the team and to support this really difficult project, because it was tough. Jim's new sub, testing it, going deeper and deeper until we were able to have the team and the technical confidence to dive, for Jim to make that extraordinary solo science dive into the Mariana Trench. So there's half a century, and when you get an opportunity like that with some 50 science and engineering projects during that half century, all of them fascinating, all of them contributing to science, contributing to engineering, there is a responsibility to share this.
This podcast and our organization is called Meet the Ocean for a reason. We are here to introduce you to what you might not know about the waters of our planet. And I make sure to ask everyone I interview, when did they first meet the ocean? Because I want to know when they realize the immensity of it, or how exactly it plays a part in their lives. Everyone answers differently, and Dr. Joe is no exception.
I was in high school, and I was a competitive swimmer, and someone suggested that I take a trip to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was living in Toronto and going to high school in Toronto at that time. I had a really good coach, and he said, look, if you really want to advance your swimming abilities, go down to Fort Lauderdale. There's this annual clinic, and the best swimmers at the university level are down there, great coaches, and it'll be a benefit. So I did. I got on a train, and I went down there and met some extraordinary guys and advanced my swimming. I was a competitive breaststroker. But someone said while we were there, look, why don't we try this thing called scuba diving? Now, this was a long time ago. This was 1954. And scuba diving, as some of your listeners will understand, was just kind of in its infancy. So we went, we found the place. They trained us in the morning in the pool, and in the afternoon we were on a boat, a small boat, off Fort Lauderdale, diving on a coral reef. For a kid from Canada to slide over the side of that boat and to pass through the interface into this universe of color and rhythms and patterns and creatures, whoa, man, I thought I'd gone to another planet. So I'm down there and I'm going, whoa, how do I become part of this? And that day changed my life. I met Mother Ocean on her terms, and I fell in love with her. And I decided, I didn't know how, I had no idea how I would do this, but I decided that I needed to, I always loved the outdoors, but here I'd found something really special. And I wanted to explore, I wanted to discover, I wanted to tell stories. And so I learned how to scuba dive, but I also understood that if I was going to work in the ocean, I needed a skill. I couldn't just have a lifetime of swimming around under the sea. I had to bring something to the equation. So I got a medical degree, and I wasn't a good student for a whole lot of reasons. I was in the half of the class that made the upper half possible. But I got through, and then I had this great passion for the ocean, for medicine, and something very fortunate happened to me. The United States Navy, because of an accident that had occurred, was looking for young doctors, and I happened to get a job with a guy called Edwin Link, who was a real undersea pioneer, an inventor who built the first undersea portable station called SPID, Submerged Portable Inflatable Dwelling it was. And that's what happened, as I mentioned earlier. He asked me to come and work with him. He gave me a Link Foundation Fellowship to study diving medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. And I was lucky. I just happened to come on the stage just the right time when they were looking for young guys who were interested in diving medicine. And we were going into space at that time, so I got to meet astronauts who were learning, and you may not know this, but the first astronauts learned about zero gravity as scuba divers. That's the only place they could train. So all of this is a long way of telling you that I had this wonderful day where I met Mother Ocean on her terms. She was gorgeous, seductive, and I knew that I had to somehow work in her interior, below the surface. And the quest I started off with was trying to understand the physiology and the psychology of men and women who live and work inside the ocean. Not just diving, but at that time we had stations and research subs, and we were spending hours, days, even weeks beneath the sea. There was a thing called saturation diving at that time. So it was the psychology and physiology of what were the limits, how deep could we go, how long could we stay, what technologies did we need to support us. And so a very eventful rendezvous for me.
Saturation. Normally, you hear that word and you think about getting soaking wet. Maybe splashed with a bucket of water. But with saturation diving, it's less about the water and more about the gases that the divers are using to breathe. Because depending on how deep you are, there's a limit to what the tissues in our bodies can absorb. Before Dr. Joe and his colleagues came along, our knowledge of what happens to the human body in deep water for extended periods of time was limited. But such a gap in our understanding invited tragedy, and many suffered or even died without us knowing the exact reason why. Maybe you've heard of the bends. Some think it's an affliction that a diver gets in their joints. You know, the places where they can bend. But it's worse than that. The simple explanation is that when your body has too much nitrogen in it, you can get in a lot of trouble. Depending on absorption and pressure, the nitrogen can form bubbles within the diver's body. And they can be extremely painful, if not lethal.
Not lethal. Not lethal. Not lethal. Not lethal. We're a go for entry. I'm coming down, commencing descent. 10 meters. 20 meters. 30 meters. Pilot coming into view. 60 meters and holding. Looks like there's some damage down here.
This is Charlotte Fisher, reading from Dr. Joe Macinnis' book, Breathing Underwater, The Quest to Live in the Sea. If you spend your life working under the ocean, there are certain days that fall deep into your memory. One of these days was June 18th, 1973, when 4 men in a small research sub made what should have been a routine dive in the Florida Keys. Reaching the bottom at 360 feet, they attempted to recover a scientific sample, came too close to the wreckage of a U.S. Navy destroyer, and became entangled in a wire hanging off of its stern. Teams of salvage divers from the U.S. Naval Station in the Key West tried to rescue them, but were held back by strong currents. After 16 hours, the cold and carbon dioxide in the sub's diving compartment rose to lethal levels. The 2 men inside lost consciousness and, in a matter of minutes, were dead. Hours later, the sub was brought to the surface, and the 2 men in the forward compartment were saved. I remember standing on the wide concrete jetty at the naval station as sea diver. The sub's mothership came into the port. There were about 20 of us watching the all-white research ship turn and come toward us. No one spoke. A soft breeze carried the smell of seaweed and brine. The evening before, Edwin Link had called me at my Toronto office. Link was the acclaimed inventor and undersea pioneer who owned Sea Diver. "There's been an accident," he said in a voice barely audible. "Can you come down?"
There is no doubt that these stories carry weight, because we know a price has been paid for us to know what we do today. Luckily for myself and anyone else who has put a scuba tank on their back, Dr. Joe spent a lifetime helping to solve these problems, making it safer for underwater researchers, builders, and explorers to continue their work. You can imagine that I had to ask a man who has spent so much time underwater. How does he describe the feeling?
For all of us, it is the experience, isn't it? You go through the difficulty of the gear and the dressing up for what I call a halo moment, which diving offers us all the time, and especially under ice for me. I mean, I'll pull out a story that you've heard me tell, but it was such a singular moment for me because it argues for times when we dive, to stop what we're doing, which is very important, photography, whatever it is, science, and just take a deep breath and kind of hold your breath and look around and get a sense of the majesty of where we are. And for me, one of the most exquisite moments was that first dive under the North Pole, where the water was crystal clear, and I had planted the flag. We had this small, and I should give you a little kind of context here. It was a military exercise where they were looking for volunteers. They dropped us at the North Pole. The Canadian forces supported us. We were there for 3 days. We made 10 dives, and we did science. We had a biologist and a geologist with us. We were looking at the architecture of pressure ridges. We were collecting samples, first ever. And so it was a small science mission. And in the middle of this dive, I stopped taking pictures of the incredible ice because we were next to a pressure ridge where the blocks of ice jammed together, and there was this keel that went down probably to 100, 150 feet, a sail that went up. But the clarity, because there was no rivers, no sediments, nothing. It was just the clearest water. We could see a quarter of a mile to another pressure ridge. We measured it. We walked across the ice to it. And the sun was, of course, high in the sky. It was March, sun never set. So I'm in the water, and I know that I'm at the top of the top of the world. All directions are south. All the time zones converge. And I just felt so privileged to have this unique experience. And what I'm saying, and you know this, yeah, that was the North Pole, but this kind of opportunity is available all the time. No matter what kind of job we're doing, no matter where we're diving, for pleasure, for fun, just to stop and get a sense of, whoa, this is really a special place. Mother Ocean is giving me a gift today. I am looking at her interior as few or maybe no human beings have ever seen it. I mean, this is the first generation has been able to go under the surface of the ocean and spend time. That's a gift. Out of those kind of moments where you step back comes some very important things to us personally. Humility, respect, a kind of reverence for the life that you're in there with and that you're filming, and a kind of obligation to speak out on their behalf, which is what this Meet the Ocean is all about. I mean, we're on this planet not alone, but with these extraordinary creatures, from the microscopic to the leopard seal, to the killer whales that we saw yesterday, to the ice. And one of the things I loved about this trip was being reminded that this planet is, at least at the poles and up in glaciers, is a kingdom of ice. There's still lots of things to be discovered, lots of creatures, and that's what's exciting. Mother Ocean is big. I mean, 140 million square miles, average depth, 4,000 meters. That's a lot of room. And we haven't seen much of it. And we have to protect all of it. That's important.
Heroes are nice.
Heroes are nice. I agree that heroes are nice.
Oh, thank goodness.
Wait, I have one more question. The ocean makes up most of our world. It's so big, how come it needs people to save it?
There are so many fish in the ocean, and some fish are dying.
Some fish are dying.
Because they're getting sick.
They're getting sick?
Yes.
Okay.
Ever since people started polluting the oceans back in 1916, I would say, their homes have been infested by trash and water bottles and...
Oh, that's gross.
With all of these discoveries and lessons learned, Dr. Joe has accumulated quite an array of stories to tell. From an early love of poetry, he continued on to author several books describing his experiences.
Here is an excerpt from Dr. Joe's book titled Deep Leadership. Great leaders are levity makers. They can find humor in anything, especially the urgent and life and death stuff. Great leaders are always ready with a wry smile, quick wit, and self-deprecating humor. They know that being lighthearted gives the moment a luminous bounce. For them, levity is more about fun than being funny. Ingredients of leadership like cool competence and hot zone humor cannot be taught in books or the classroom. They must be learned by time and events, mistakes, and failures. They are shaped by the challenges accepted and self-knowledge achieved.
Well, again, it's what I said earlier. If you have an opportunity in life to do meaningful work with meaningful people, as I have, then there is an obligation to understand what it means. And so for me, it's been writing. And the last two books were Breathing Underwater, The Quest to Live in the Sea. And in that, I told the story of how we started with Cousteau and George Bond and Ed Link, learning how to live inside the sea and what it was like to be part of that. With Deep Leadership, I came to a subject that fascinates me, and that is how you lead teams in high-risk environments. And the premise is very simple, and that is that out there listening are young people who are going to find themselves in a position of leadership where they have to inform, influence, encourage, even inspire a group of people around them to do something tough.
Dr. Joe, I'd like to thank you not only for what you've done for scuba diving and underwater exploration, but also for being with me here today.
Okay, my thanks to you. And we've been fairly serious here. And I think we got to leave your listeners with the idea that one of the best things about going to sea or diving is the humor in it. That you meet guys with a great sense of humor and fun. And that should be sprinkled throughout all the things that we do, what I call hot zone humor.
Meet the Ocean is a listener-supported project. You can find ways to support our efforts, as well as photos and videos of our beloved saltwater inhabitants at meettheocean.com. Special thanks to our editor, Andrew Gettings, composer, Vin Gast, actor, Kyle Cotton, Megan Taylor and her sons, Colin and Ezekiel, and podcast correspondent, Charlotte Fisher. That's me. Don't forget to rate and review our podcast on iTunes, and of course, subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Thank you for listening, everybody.